All right, y'all know I'm usually pretty skeptical of anything dubbed criminal justice reform because, at least lately, it seems to mean opening the jailhouse doors and letting thugs and felons run amok. But when my friend Jessica Jackson sent me this story, my ears perked up. Of all the work Biden's DOJ should be doing to look into, well, itself and Joe Biden, they have decided to pursue a retrial of a Trump clemency beneficiary by the name of Philip Formes. He received a 20-year sentence back in 2019 after being convicted of 20 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States, receiving and paying federal health care program kickbacks, money laundering, federal program bribery, and obstruction of justice, with 6 charges being dismissed and the jury failing to reach a verdict on 6 others. Now, Formes entered an appeal invoking prosecutorial misconduct, and Trump commuted his sentence shortly before leaving office. But now the DOJ prosecutors want to go after him on the hung charges. Here now to fill in the gaps is human rights attorney and mentor to Kim Kardashian, my friend Jessica Jackson. Jessica, it's great to have you back.
Thank you for having me on again, Tomi.
So I want to dig into this case because when my audience hears all the things that he was charged with and convicted with, they're probably thinking to themselves, hey, maybe this guy shouldn't be walking on the streets. Maybe this wasn't the right move. Maybe the DOJ should be pursuing this retrial. Fill in the gap so we understand why you're so passionate about making sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. While he was convicted, and by the way, did serve 4.5 years inside of prison, he was not convicted of all of the charges brought against him. In fact, some of them were dismissed, and the jury hung on several of those counts, meaning there wasn't enough evidence that he had actually done these things. And these were the more serious charges that had been brought against him. The DOJ at the time had gone out, Obama's DOJ at the time had gone out and really gone to the media and made it sound like this man had committed billions of dollars in fraud, and that just was not what was proven in court. So he did some time, and then, of course, as you said, he appealed on the prosecutorial misconduct, and President Trump granted him a commutation. What is happening now is unprecedented. This has never happened before. You have never had one president grant a commutation to somebody, them come home, reintegrate into their community. He's back in his kids' lives. He's working again. He's, volunteering and doing charitable things. He's back in the community, not causing any issues. And suddenly, the Department of Justice, Biden's Department of Justice, is threatening to retry him again and trying to retry him again on these hung counts. Absolutely unprecedented and could set a very dangerous precedence moving forward.
So, Jessica, it seems to me, just on face value, when we talk about what Trump did and now Biden's DOJ trying to undo it, I don't know if this is the full story, but to me it seemingly looks like Biden's just trying to undo something that Donald Trump did. And this seems less about Philip himself in the case and more about some kind of a vendetta. Is there any inkling that that's playing a role in something like this?
Listen, Tomi, the beauty in this, in our friendship, is that I am a Democrat, you are a Republican. And I think despite that, in this case, we can agree that something is going on here because it's never been done before. This man is not a public safety threat. His restitution was left intact, which means he's still having to pay back his victims, which, by the way, becomes more complicated when you're in prison to pay anybody back. So the sole reason they're going after him is because they don't think that he served enough time in prison. Those 4.5 years weren't enough for him, and they were upset that Donald Trump gave him a commutation. So yeah, this unfortunately does seem politically motivated. And like I said, it's setting a terrible precedence. Can you imagine if every person who receives a commutation, everybody who does the hard work of coming home, taking responsibility for their actions, getting employment, getting housing, getting back on track with their family, if every single one of them has to worry that when a new president is elected, they're going to lose all of that and end up back in prison, it would absolutely upset the system. And it's not what our Constitution is intended to do.
Yeah, this person's life is being treated like a political volleyball, whether you're still upset about what he's done or not. I think the matter of being a political vendetta, at least on its face, is really problematic. But moving back to just the DOJ in general, as you mentioned, I'm obviously a conservative. So I've been looking at what the DOJ has been doing for the last couple of years. And there's a lot of things that strike me as a little odd, especially when you look at something like this and spending the time and energy to go after this gentleman when there's so much going on in this country that you'd think maybe would have a little bit more precedence. But Jessica, even going back to the DOJ and Merrick Garland trying to investigate parents at school board meetings. I mean, trying to put people behind bars for protesting outside of abortion clinics, even praying outside of abortion clinics. All of it seems hyper political. I know that you've worked under several administrations, worked with administrations on both sides of the aisle. So is what we're seeing now with this DOJ, is this a little odd to you based on the history that you've seen?
I think at the end of the day, whether it's a Democratic president or if it's a Republican president who's in office, the goal of the Department of Justice needs to be public safety. It needs to make sure that our streets are safe, right? So going after people for frivolous things, locking people up, that doesn't actually equate us being safer. What makes us safer and what we have evidence makes us safer is investing in mental health care programs, investing in substance abuse programs, investing in, making sure that people who are in prison are getting the programming that they need so they can come home and succeed and not pose any risk to the community. It seems to me that focusing on incarceration and going after folks like Philip Formas, who is not a threat to public safety, is absolutely should not be a priority.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. But moving now to some other discussions, because I love having these discussions with you. I know that you're so knowledgeable on it. We don't always see eye to eye, but I love to learn from you. And you changed my mind on several aspects. So I have to ask you, there's some stuff going on in Washington, D.C. right now, a giant crime reclassification, specifically trying to downgrade carjackings, and they're supposed to be seen as maybe not so violent, maybe not so problematic, maybe not such a threat to public safety, when carjackings have been a pretty big problem in D.C. Even D.C.'s mayor, Muriel Bowser, said this is a bad idea to reclassify this crime. So I got to get your take on something like this. Do you think that that's a smart move for that city to be doing?
I think that what our politicians need to be focused on is actually addressing the underlying reason why people are committing crimes. This stuff where we're just arguing over what the punishment is once somebody's committed a crime, there's already a victim. There's already a crime that's been committed. I don't understand why 99.9% of our resources and the conversation has to be focused on what do we do once somebody's committed a crime. We need to be focused on how do we prevent crime? What are the systems that we know? What are the programs we know that are out there that are evidence-based that show to actually reduce crime? We know education, we know mental health services, substance abuse services, job training, putting people, vocational degrees, making sure people are getting employed. Those kind of things actually prevent crime. And that's where our conversation needs to be, because it's just too late once a person has already committed a crime to be focused so much, hyper-focused with all of our resources on what to do then.
No, I agree with you on that, although I do think that the deterrent factor does play a role in it. If you think you're going to get away with something, you're more likely to do it. So that's a factor in it as well. But I also want to bring something to you, because I have a feeling that you probably agree with a guest and a friend of mine that I've had for years. His name is Maj Toure. He runs Black Guns Matter. He focuses on Second Amendment and gun rights and information and training, especially for people in inner cities. He's been working on this for many, many years, but he lives in Philadelphia, and he said, hey, listen, the crime is going crazy there right now. And he said the reason largely for young people, why they're committing crimes and why they're acting this way is because during COVID, a lot of these community centers were shut down and kids had nowhere to turn. So they turned to the streets. Is that what you're seeing in a lot of your work as well? Because I know that factor of addressing crime before it happens is really important to you. What can we do to fix that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. COVID, we already have a very weak social services network across our big cities, right? It's already very hard to get the resources that people need, to have programs that children need, to keep the youth busy, keep them off the streets. That's all very delicate. Then you come into a nationwide pandemic, everything shuts down. we had a very real problem with kids not even being able to get the lunches that they normally got at schools, with kids not having a place to go while their parents worked, with parents losing their jobs and having fewer resources in their homes. This is absolutely something that needs to be addressed. We also saw a huge gap in society widening, right? Like, I am blessed. I had the resources to have a person who came to our home every day and took care of my children and made sure they were on their Zoom school and was reading with them while I got my work done. There were parents who were trying to work and educate their children at the exact same time. So now you've got a widened gap. You have years worth of kids who didn't get the education they needed, didn't get the nutrition they needed, didn't have the programs they needed. And this absolutely needs to be addressed before the gap continues to widen.
Well, that's something that you and I certainly agree on, and it shouldn't be partisan. And I think we can all come together on that. COVID time was a really stupid time in our nation's history as far as I'm concerned, and I hope that we can get back on track. But thank you for always bringing us the information, everything that you do. You know, we don't always agree, but we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. I believe that to be true. Thanks, Jessica, for spending so much time with me.
Thank you for having me on.
Last weekend, Atlanta was engulfed in social justice over the proposed construction of a public safety training center. It was mostly peaceful, if by mostly peaceful you mean explosives, bricks, assault, and property damage. But it turns out this was just a weekend of fun for highly privileged rich kids from out of state. Yes, let's take a look at the backgrounds of the disenfranchised youth who set Atlanta ablaze, shall we? Francis Frankie Carroll, 22, from Maine, is one of 6 people charged after riots last weekend. Now, while he might look psycho and homeless, he's far from it. He is the son of a millionaire who grew up in a mansion in a wealthy beach town. But he's not the only one. His gaggle of privileged Antifa comrades also included another non-binary activist who appears to be female but goes by the name Henry. They, them is from the affluent suburb of Happy Valley in Portland. Then there's Ivan Ferguson, a classically trained clarinetist who studied at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Super low income, I'm sure. And to round it out, Emily Murphy, a vegan activist, whatever the hell that is. These privileged, seemingly white, upper-class brats came to Georgia to light crap on fire and go buck wild because, well, they can. It's just a game to them, and isn't that just special? They may not be true activists, but they are true losers, one and all. Switching gears to my next selection of losers. Now, the iconic Disney ride Splash Mountain closed this week after a very small yet vocal minority complained the ride was racist. Stupid move, I know. But now, Disney zealots are taking their affinity for it all a little too seriously with this, buying genuine Splash Mountain water online. One listing had an asking price of $1,000. This is the equivalent of creepers buying toe jam pics on OnlyFans. Y'all are wild. Adult Disney fanatics are just plain weirdos. I'll say it, and I don't apologize for it either. If you're willing to not only buy theme park water, but worse, buy theme park water that may or may not be theme park water, you are weird and you are a loser. It is what it is. But moving on to my final loser of the week, non-diabetics who are buying up and driving up the cost of diabetes medication so as to get skinnier. This craze of injecting diabetes drugs such as Ozempic and similar medications for weight loss has been made popular on what else? Communist TikTok. And now there's a frickin' worldwide shortage of the treatment, and actual diabetics are pissed, as they should be. These drugs are not for skinny Instagram chicks who want to be skinnier Instagram chicks. These drugs are for diabetics, and guess what? They need them, and y'all are using them as to get a get skinny quick method, and it's sick, so stop. Not only is this weight loss method not healthy, it's just plain lazy. So get off TikTok and go for a run. Good Lord. Those are my losers of the week. God help us.